Most people spend their entire lives obsessed with what others think of them, while a small minority become obsessed with themselves. And that small difference changes everything. If you are watching this, you've probably reached that moment in your life when you realize it's time to stop living for others and start living for yourself. My name is Jung. And for decades I have explored the inner worlds of the most conscious and evolved minds. All those who have reached true greatness in any area of life share one thing in common. They are not obsessed with what others think, do, or say about them. They are obsessed with understanding themselves. But here's the question that could transform your entire existence. When was the last time you truly sat down to think about yourself? Not your problems, not your responsibilities, not what others expect from you, but you, who you really are, what you genuinely desire, the person you are becoming with every passing day. The truth is that most of us have spent so much time worrying about others that we've lost connection with ourselves. And that disconnection is precisely what keeps us trapped in lives that don't belong to us, in jobs that don't inspire us, in relationships that don't nourish us, and in an existence that feels more like survival than a full, meaningful life. But today, that can change. I'm going to show you how to become obsessed with yourself in a way that is not selfish, but essential. A way that not only transforms your life, but allows you to serve the world with far more authenticity and power. Let me tell you about a moment that changed my perspective forever. I was in my early 30s, feeling completely lost. I had failed several times, and I was sitting alone in my small apartment, surrounded by the echo of disappointment. I had spent years trying to impress others, following the advice of people who hadn't achieved what I desired, living according to the expectations of my family, my culture, my society. That night, I asked myself a question that shattered everything. If I didn't have to impress anyone, not even one person, what would I do? For the first time in years, I was silent. I didn't have an answer because I had completely lost the connection with myself. That was the night I made the most important decision of my life. I would become a student of my own soul. I would study myself, understand myself, and evolve with the same discipline and passion that a scientist studies the mysteries of the universe. That inner decision, that conscious obsession with self-knowledge, was what carried me from confusion to clarity, from failure to the expansion of consciousness that later inspired thousands. But here's what I want you to understand. Being obsessed with yourself doesn't mean being narcissistic or fettered. It means becoming the best version of yourself so that you can serve life from abundance, not from emptiness. When you know yourself deeply, when you cultivate your talents and strengthen your character, you become a vessel through which the world can receive something greater. Think about it this way. If you were a healer, wouldn't it be your responsibility to perfect your healing ability? Wouldn't it be selfish not to develop your potential to the fullest? In the same way, it is your moral duty to evolve into the most complete version of yourself, because the world needs the highest expression of who you are. When I speak of being obsessed with yourself, I'm referring to 4 essential dimensions that most people never consciously develop: your conscious mind, your emotional depth, your spiritual growth, and your physical evolution. These 4 areas are not separate. They are parts of one whole. When developed in harmony, they create a powerful inner alchemy that transforms every aspect of your life. Let's begin with your conscious mind. Most people allow their minds to become battlegrounds for random thoughts, external opinions, and mental noise. But those who master life treat their minds as sacred ground. They feed them consciously, exercise them, and direct them toward meaningful goals. Each morning, before exposing your mind to the outside world, you should nourish it with your own chosen input. Read something that expands you. Listen to something that uplifts you. Reflect on what truly matters. That deliberate discipline is not a coincidence. It's a conscious act of self-possession. Have you noticed how most people start their day? They immediately check their phones, read the news, scroll through social media, surrendering control of their minds to external forces from the very first minute. And then they wonder why they feel anxious, distracted, and lost. A healthy obsession with yourself means you decide what enters your mind. You choose the ideas you focus on, the voices you listen to, the images you consume, because your mind is the soil where your entire life grows. I once met a man who felt completely drained. He told me, "I feel like my life doesn't belong to me. I spend every day responding to the demands of others, solving problems that aren't mine, living according to priorities that aren't mine. By the end of the day, I have no energy left for what truly matters to me." I asked him, "How much time each day do you spend thinking about your own life?" He looked confused. "What do you mean? How many minutes a day do you dedicate consciously to your own goals, dreams, and priorities?" After a long silence, he said, "None." That was the problem. He had spent so many years obsessed with others' expectations that he had lost himself entirely. We worked together to create what I called sacred self-reflection time. Moments dedicated solely to contemplating his own growth, vision, and direction. The results were extraordinary. Within months, he had regained not only his energy, but a sense of inner purpose and clarity that transformed every area of his life. Because when you become consciously obsessed with yourself, you have infinitely more to give. This leads us to the second dimension, emotional development. Most people live with their emotions on autopilot, reacting to life, letting external events dictate their inner state. But being obsessed with yourself means taking full ownership of your emotional world. Once met a woman who said, "I'm in my 40s, and I'm just realizing I never learned how to manage my emotions. I spend days feeling anxious or frustrated, and I don't even know why." I told her something I want you to remember. Your emotions are not something that happens to you. They are something you create. Every emotion is the result of the meaning you give to what happens around you. And those meanings can be transformed consciously. A healthy obsession with yourself means observing your emotional patterns, as a scientist would study a natural phenomenon without judgment, with curiosity, with honesty. Because when you learn to understand your emotions, you stop being their prisoner and become their master. And that is where your real transformation begins. What situations trigger your negative emotions? What specific thoughts arise right before your moments of anxiety or frustration? What strategies truly work to shift your emotional state? Personally, I've developed what I call my emotional toolkit. These are deliberate inner strategies I use whenever I need to shift my emotional state quickly. For example, when frustration surfaces, I immediately ask myself this question: what can I learn from this situation that will make me stronger or wiser? This single question instantly shifts my focus from victimhood to the role of the learner, from resistance to curiosity. Have you ever thought about that? Most people spend more time learning how to use their phones than learning how to manage their own emotions. They study the manual for their car, but they never study the manual for their own mind and heart. And then they wonder why they feel emotionally out of control. Obsessing over yourself means becoming an expert in your own emotional mechanics. It means consciously observing which thoughts and activities elevate you and which ones drain you. It means developing daily rituals that nourish your emotional well-being, not as a luxury, but as a non-negotiable priority. For example, I've learned that I need at least 20 minutes of absolute silence every day to stay emotionally balanced. No phone, no music, no conversation, just me and my thoughts. In the beginning, I felt guilty for wasting this time, but eventually, I understood that this space didn't just enhance my emotional state, it made me more productive, more creative, and more fully present in every interaction. The third dimension of becoming truly obsessed with yourself is spiritual growth. And when I say spiritual, I don't necessarily mean religion, though it may include it. I'm talking about your connection to something greater than your immediate problems, to your deeper purpose, to the values that truly guide your life. I vividly remember a conversation with a successful entrepreneur years ago. He had everything society calls success: money, recognition, a thriving business. But he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "I've achieved everything I thought I wanted. But every morning I wake up feeling empty, like I'm acting in a play I never wrote." So I asked him, "When was the last time you felt connected to something that truly matters beyond material success?" He didn't have an answer. He had become so obsessed with external goals that he had lost connection with his inner purpose. Obsessing over yourself includes asking over and over again, "Why am I here? What is my unique contribution to the world? Which values genuinely matter to me?" Not the ones others say I should value, but the ones that truly resonate in my heart. These are not questions you answer once and forget. They are questions you revisit constantly as you evolve and grow. Personally, I set aside time every week to reflect on these fundamental questions. Not because I lack clarity about my purpose, but because that clarity must be renewed and deepened over time. One of the most powerful realizations you can have is that your spiritual life, your sense of purpose and meaning, is not separate from your practical life. On the contrary, when spiritual clarity is present, every practical decision becomes easier and more precise. You know which opportunities to pursue and which ones to let go. You know where to invest your time and energy. You know which relationships to nurture and which ones to release. Imagine how your life would change if every major decision you made came from a deep clarity about who you are and why you are here, instead of making choices out of fear, social pressure, or other people's expectations. You'd act from your authentic center. That is the difference between truly living your life and living the life others expect of you. The fourth dimension of becoming fully committed to yourself is your physical evolution. And this is where many people disconnect because they associate taking care of their bodies with vanity or superficiality. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Your body is the vehicle through which you experience everything else in life. If that vehicle isn't working properly, everything else is affected. Let me be direct with you. You cannot have a rich, emotional, mental, and spiritual life if your physical body is neglected. Physical energy is the foundation of every other kind of energy. When your body feels strong, vital, and healthy, your mind becomes sharper, your emotions more stable, and your spiritual connection deeper. Personally, I treat my exercise routine and my nutrition with the same seriousness I give to any meaningful commitment in my life. Not as something I do when I have time, but as a fundamental priority. At 80 years old, I have more energy than many people half my age because I've made physical health a constructive obsession for decades. But here's what I want you to understand. Becoming deeply committed to your physical health is not about achieving some external standard of beauty or fitness. It's about honoring the only body you have, maximizing your vitality and energy so you can fully contribute to the world. Imagine what would happen if you began treating your body like the sacred temple it is. if you became obsessed with giving it the fuel it needs to function at its best, if you develop daily rituals that honor your physical well-being, not as a burden, but as an investment in everything you want to achieve in life. Now, let's talk about the resistance you'll face when you begin this process of becoming truly committed to yourself. Because, to be completely honest with you, not everyone will understand or support this transformation. Some people in your life have grown comfortable with the version of you that prioritizes everyone else's needs. When you begin to set boundaries, to say no to things that don't align with your priorities, and to invest time in your personal growth, resistance will inevitably arise. Some people won't understand. I remember when I first started implementing my morning routines dedicated to self-development. My then-wife asked me, "Isn't it a little selfish to spend so much time focused on yourself when there are so many other things that need attention?" It was a fair question, one that made me reflect deeply. I explained something that I want you to understand as well. When you become constructively obsessed with yourself, you don't become unavailable to others. You become far more valuable to them. When you consciously work on your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical development, you have infinitely more to offer in every relationship and responsibility. Carl Jung often reminded us that one cannot touch the soul of another without first discovering their own. It's like the oxygen mask analogy on airplanes. You're told to put your mask on first, not because you are more important than your child, but because if you can't breathe, you won't be able to help anyone else. In the same way, if you don't invest in your own growth and well-being, you will eventually have nothing real left to offer others. The resistance will also come from your own conditioned mind. We carry years, sometimes decades, of programming that teaches us that focusing on ourselves is selfish, that good people always put others first, and that taking care of our own needs is somehow morally inferior. But think of it this way. How many people do you know who spend their entire lives focused on others yet live filled with resentment, exhaustion, and quiet frustration? How many people have sacrificed so much of themselves for others that they no longer even know who they are? Resentment is always a signal that you have given more than you truly had to give. And paradoxically, you can only give more when you first have more within you. To be healthfully obsessed with yourself means ensuring your own tank is full so that you can give to others from abundance rather than emptiness. Jung taught that wholeness is not achieved by ignoring yourself but by embracing and integrating every part of who you are. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this. A few years ago, I worked with a woman in her late 40s, a single mother of 3. She was exhausted, resentful, and on the verge of an emotional breakdown. She told me, "I don't have time to focus on myself. My children need me." I asked her a question that at first sounded harsh, but was deeply necessary. What kind of example are you setting for your children about how a person should treat themselves? If your children grow up and treat their own families the way you treat yourself, would you be proud of that? That question struck her like lightning. She realized that by neglecting herself, she was teaching her children that self-care was optional, that their own needs were less important than the needs of others, that being valuable meant sacrificing yourself to exhaustion. We worked together to build small but non-negotiable blocks of time dedicated solely to her growth and well-being. 30 minutes every morning before the kids woke up, an hour on Sundays to do something that nourished her soul. Her healthy self-focus didn't make her selfish. It made her stronger, wiser, and more loving. Now, let's talk about how to cultivate this constructive self-devotion in your own life. The first and most important practice is what I call the sacred hour. It's a period of time each day, ideally at the same time, that you dedicate entirely to your personal development. It's not time for work problems, not time for family plans, not time for chores. It's sacred time meant only for you. During this hour, you might read books that feed your mind, meditate to strengthen your spiritual connection, exercise to energize your body, or simply reflect on your goals and dreams. The key is consistency and ownership. This time belongs to you alone. When I began this practice decades ago, I chose the early morning. I woke up an hour earlier than usual to read, plan my day, and reconnect with myself. It was difficult at first. My body wanted to stay in bed. My mind told me I had more urgent things to do. But I persisted, and that single hour became the foundation of all my success. Think about how you can apply this in your own life. It doesn't have to be a full hour. Start with 30 minutes or even 15. What matters is consistency and intention. You are declaring to yourself and to the universe that you are worthy of time devoted solely to your evolution. The second strategy is what I call the regular life audit. Once a week, take a moment to consciously review how you're investing your time and energy. Ask yourself, how much of my time this week was spent doing what truly matters to me versus doing what others expect from me? Carl Jung would say that the path to individuation, the process of becoming your truest self, requires brutal honesty. This reflection is not about judgment. It's about awareness. Because once you become aware, you can no longer live unconsciously. You begin to reclaim your life, piece by piece, choice by choice, moment by moment. And that, in the end, is the true art of living. Not losing yourself in the demands of others, but finding yourself so completely that everything you give flows from wholeness. How much time have I truly invested in my personal growth? In which moments did I feel most alive, most authentic? This is not a practice meant for self-judgment or guilt. It is an invitation to awaken awareness, to see clearly how you are actually living your life. As Carl Jung would remind us, most people wander through years on autopilot, repeating the same habits, trapped in routines that numb the soul. They never question if the path they walk is truly leading them toward who they are meant to become. A weekly self-audit allows you to make small yet profoundly meaningful adjustments. Maybe you realize you've spent too much time scrolling through illusions on social media, and too little time feeding your mind through reading. Maybe you notice how often you said yes to obligations that drained you, and no to opportunities that could have expanded you. These realizations are gold. They give you the power to change your inner direction. Small shifts, when sustained, transform the entire landscape of your life. Personally, I do this reflection every Sunday evening. I review the week that has passed, and plan the one ahead based on what I've learned about myself. It's a ritual of alignment. It keeps me connected to my true priorities instead of being dragged by the urgency of others. The next step is to cultivate what Jung would call loving boundaries. To become who you are, you must learn to say no to requests and opportunities that do not resonate. This is not selfishness. It is self-respect. It is the recognition that your time and your energy are sacred resources, and how you spend them determines the quality of your existence. One of Jung's great teachings was that every time you say yes to something unaligned, you are unconsciously saying no to your own individuation, to the process of becoming whole. That truth changed my entire approach to commitment. Before accepting any new responsibility, I ask myself, does this bring me closer to my authentic self, or pull me further away? Does this use my natural gifts, or force me to betray them? Does this energize me, or quietly drain me? Within the realm of choice, selectivity becomes an act of wisdom. I have learned to be radically intentional, and that intentionality has not only elevated my life, it has made my contributions to others more powerful and authentic. Imagine if you treated your own commitments this way. You saw every decision as an investment in the life you wish to create. Let me tell you about one of the most transformative experiences I've ever witnessed. A man of 55 came to me completely lost. He said, "I've spent my entire adult life trying to be what others needed, the son my parents expected, the husband my wife demanded, the employee my boss admired. But I never stopped to ask myself who I really am." I looked at him and said, "Then let us begin there. If you could design your life from the ground up, free from expectations and fears, what would it look like?" At first, he couldn't answer. He had been disconnected from his essence for so long that his true preferences were buried beneath years of compliance. So I asked him to spend a week simply observing, to notice when he felt alive and when he felt drained, when his actions came from truth and when they came from obligation. Gradually, he began to awaken. He rediscovered his love for photography, something he had abandoned decades earlier for being impractical. He realized he felt alive in deep, meaningful conversations and exhausted in superficial gatherings. He saw that creativity and autonomy were his core values. Yet his career offered neither. The transformation was not sudden, but it was profound. He began taking small but consistent steps, picking up his camera again, seeking genuine connections, and reshaping his work to reflect more of his creative spirit. Most importantly, he began making choices rooted in his own values, not in the borrowed expectations of others. 2 years later, he sent me a photograph. He was unrecognizable, not in appearance, but in energy. His eyes held a spark that had long been missing. He wrote, "For the first time in decades, I feel like I am living my life, not playing a role in someone else's story." That is the power of constructive self-obsession. Not narcissism, but self. It is not about becoming self-centered. It is about becoming centered in the self. The true self that Jung spoke of, the one that connects you to the wholeness of life itself. Because when you align with who you truly are, you stop merely existing and begin to live with purpose. Now, as we reach the end of this reflection, I want to leave you with both a challenge and a promise. The challenge is this: begin today, not tomorrow, not next week, not when you have time. Dedicate at least 15 minutes to nurturing your own evolution. Read something that enriches your mind. Do something that strengthens your body. Reflect on something that nourishes your soul. This is how transformation begins: small, deliberate, consistent acts of self-commitment. And the promise: if you commit to this constructive self-obsession every day, your life will transform in ways you cannot yet imagine. You will cultivate a deep, unshakable confidence that no longer depends on external validation. You will begin making decisions from clarity, not confusion. You will form relationships of greater depth and authenticity, because you will finally relate to others from your authentic self instead of a mask. And most importantly, you will stop living the life that others designed for you and start creating the life that your soul has been waiting to live. That is the difference between merely existing and truly living. That is the path to becoming whole. If this message has offered you even a single insight that expands your vision, make sure to subscribe and activate the notifications. Choose to become your own priority, not out of vanity, but out of love. Love for yourself and love for the potential contribution you hold within you. Decide now. Act today. Your future self will thank you forever.